everyone, and welcome once again to our Emma Explores with our wonderful guest, Emma Cox. This series is very special to me because it brings together our professional perspective looking at their own family stories. In this case, we are delighted to welcome Emma Cox to tell us some stories about what she's learned in leveraging some new technologies from FamilySearch in particular. So welcome, everyone. It's a delight to have you. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Great to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me one moment. Can you see that okay? Yep, we can. Excellent. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Phillips and Fonblanque letters. Now, if anybody actually listened to the talk that Barbara and I had a week or so ago, there is a little bit of a sneak preview and there was a bit of homework for anybody who was here. So just a little bit of background for anybody who doesn't know me. My name's Emma Cox, as Barbara said. I'm based in England and I help people find out about their ancestors, do all sorts of different research, things like family trees and charts. I love DNA, finding living relatives, taking people on tours, all sorts of things like that. Also have a podcast, Journeys into Genealogy, and there's over 115 episodes on there now. So the letters, these letters cover all sorts of different things. So family relationships, personalities, health, names, death, and more. They're just some of the things that I've pulled out of this. This all started when on my podcast, I had a chat with a lady called Lucy Reynoldson, who is a representative in the UK for FamilySearch. And she's the one that does lots of tours. She goes out and talks to family history societies and things like that. And we had a general chat about FamilySearch and all the things that are happening at Roots Tech and things that are coming up and recent changes that have come in. And one of those changes is called full text search. Now, if you haven't heard of this, this is basically where if you have a document and you have a document that has a name associated with it. So, for example, it could be a will. So you know it's someone's will, but in that will, there are lots and lots of other information, other people like witnesses, people like beneficiaries, there are places, there are all sorts of things like that. So using full text search for any of the things that are on FamilySearch now, it will actually go through and it will find all the names that are actually within that document. It will find the places. And this is actually amazing. So she said it's a game changer. And to be quite honest, I was skeptical. I didn't think it would be brilliant, but I surprised myself and it is. So some of you may know that I have a family line called Fonblanque. So they go back to France in the 1700s. And I thought, well, I'll have a go, because when I started doing my family history research for Fonblanque, which is probably 30 odd years ago now, it wasn't a name that really came up. You might have been, if you've got one or two results, then gradually you've got a few more. And even now there aren't that many. So looking on the Fonblanque FamilySearch was very, very interesting. I'm just going to click on the link so you can see it for yourself. Let's make this full screen. So when it comes up, you have to put your keyword in on the right and press on search, and it comes up with lots and lots of different results here. So it says London, England family histories, and it gives you the years and genealogies. And with this particular line, I have one of the people in it was the Commissioner for Bankruptcy. So there are lots and lots of records that relate to him. So he is the commissioner, he's on loads and loads of different things. So always want to try and ignore those. So you can see this one here, or other people who were lawyers, that you can see there are loads and loads of results. So I'm not interested in those. I know of those. But this first one that came up, London, England family histories, it's like 1906, I haven't heard of that. And then you can see little excerpts. Anthony Fonblanque is always their business friend, writes to Miss Fonblanque, dear cousin, Louisa Fonblanque died. And I just thought, hey, this is something new. I haven't heard about this. And so I started looking into it. Now I'm just going to switch back and show you. So this is the screen that it came up. So it actually has changed the results around, funnily enough, since I did it. The genealogies thing that isn't interesting was first, and the family histories thing was second. And this is what happened. This is the first page that came up. So basically, it's a series of letters. So they say the date, they say they're to and from, and you've got a complete transcription of them. So it's not like you have to read somebody's old handwriting. They're actually been put into a book, typewritten. So here enclosed you have a £10 banknote, which I hope you will receive safe. So this is 1793. So £10 in 1793 was quite a lot of money. And I had the pleasure to dine yesterday with Mr. and Mrs. Adams, née Trefusis. So your dear cousin Anthony Fonblanque. So it's like, oh, okay, this is intriguing. So I started sort of getting all of this and just thinking, and so it goes on. And these letters are sort of separated out into different things. And I sort of think, well, who's got these letters? What are they? Because the name Fonblanque didn't come up in the at the beginning of it. And it turns out that these are the letters from the family of Phillips, Picton. And I think there's a brilliant quote from Dr. Johnson on this page. There should be a chronicle kept in every considerable family to preserve the characters and transactions of successive generations. What a lovely quote. And so this is 1906, published in London. And also on the inside here, it says who actually compiled it. So it's the papers belonging to Sir James Erasmus Phillips, Bart, unless some other authority is quoted. And the papers in his possession descended to him from his grandfather, Captain William Hollingsworth Phillips. And I thought, well, I know Hollingsworth Phillips, and I actually knew of James Erasmus Phillips. So I started to get a sense of where these actually came from. And then it shows me on the right-hand side here, there's various different chapters of the book. So it talks about the background of the Phillips family. And then chapter 4 is Anthony Fonblanque. I thought, well, he's got a whole chapter about himself. And then there's Fonblanque and Maxwell Adams. And it's like, okay, that's the second marriage there, Hollingsworth Phillips. And then it goes on to subsequent generations. And I just, oh, okay. And once I started looking at this, it's like, okay, fine, I'll carry on and sort of, wow. So I thought I'll start with talking a little bit about the Phillips family themselves. This place here is in Wales. It's called Picton Castle. And this is the current family home of the 4th Viscount St. David's. His name is Roderick Colwyn Phillips. And he is my 6th cousin once removed, once I'd actually plotted everybody on the family tree. His ancestry goes back as follows. So his father was Justin, then it was John, then it was James Erasmus. Recognise that name from the letters earlier on. James Evans was his father. And then William Hollingsworth Phillips, who married Harriet Fonblanque. So there we've got the link. So it's just fantastic to have all this information. So this is the first page of the Anthony Fonblanque chapter. So it gives me a little bit of background here about saying it's an old French family. And on the right-hand side, they've even got a little family tree. And now some of the people on this family tree I didn't actually have until I found this. From the people in France. And so, okay, I know the English line, that's fine. And the married Monsieur de Pechelier, I knew of him. But the line on the right-hand side, I did not know at all. So I've actually found another line there. So Francois married Montette de Noganet, and their son married Jeanne Balis, and their son Prosper, Jeanne Romac, and their son Emilien was a judge in the tribunal in Montauban in 1901. So it's amazing to have that extra line there. And on the left-hand side, we've said that Abel married Mademoiselle Rigal and had several daughters besides the 2 sons who are the ones who came to England and started off my family line. And at the bottom, the paragraph, the House of Fonblanque had formerly had the privilege, which was very lucrative, of manufacturing glass. For at that time, none but nobles could even assist in the working of glass. And with the exception of the men who attended to the fire and those who brought water or packed the produce, all were patrician operatives. They were each paid 10 livres a day, so that the younger sons of nobility found it worthwhile 200 years ago to devote 6 or 8 months of the year to such employment. And it's amazing social history to actually read all of this thing. So this is the start of Anthony Fonblanque. And then it goes on. So it says there are no more than 14 or 16 verrières, which are glass houses in France. And then, unfortunately, it says Thomas, who was the grandson of the one of the original sons who came over, said that they were mortgaged. And basically, the great-grandfather lost it. And it mentions about them coming over here, and it says they were naturalized, that they married 2 sisters. I knew quite a lot of this information, but it's always nice to have it confirmed by a different source. And it talks about the second marriages. So John de Fonblanque's widow, she married Charles Maxwell of Dalswinton. believed to have been a great beauty, and there's a miniature of her on ivory in the possession of Miss Emily Vowell, who's descended from one of her daughters. So it's like, I'd love to get hold of that. I have no idea where it's ended up. It hasn't ended up in our branch of the family. And it says Anthony Fonblanque. Sorry, Barbara?
Emma, if I could interrupt, all of these highlights, I just wanted to spell out what's probably obvious to everybody, but just to be sure, it's mind-blowing to think that this was turning up in a full text search, and those yellow highlights are from that text search, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just fantastic. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep on going. I'm into the glass.
And then the people coming over here. So it says here, Anthony Fonblanque married Anne Bagshaw, the eldest sister of his brother's wife. She was the eldest daughter of Thomas Bagshaw, and her mother's maiden name was Anne Moss. I didn't know the mother's maiden name. So that's another little piece of information that I got from here. And it carries on. There was a small oil picture of her. And then it says about her brothers, and then it goes through, and there's lots and lots of things. As you can see, Fonblanque is still there, and there's actually letters written in French in here, actually put directly in French, and mentions wine being very good and cheap this year, woolen goods. So there's obviously a very good relationship between the people in England and the people in France, and that kept going for several generations. And it talks about one of them is who's writing. He's in Lisbon in Portugal, and his tailor is in London, and he begs his friend to go and see a coat that's been made for him to make sure it's in a good condition before it's sent off. It's just fantastic information here. And then it goes through here. This bit on the right hand side. Basically, it talks about his mother. So Montet was one of that line that I mentioned that I didn't know of. That was part of that line. And it's like talking about going to see your poor mother, and she's not very well, but actually, sorry, the mother's very well. She's very valiant and vigorous. And your sister Annette goes well. She's decided not to marry. Your Uncle Rigel is doing better. So he's obviously not been terribly well, but he's feeling better now. Your sister Latours, so she's married Latours. Her husband, her son and daughter are all doing well. So this is family news going back and forth between two countries. I just think it's amazing. And it goes on. And then, unfortunately, Anthony Fonblanque, the brothers both came over here. I'm descended from John, and his brother Anthony went back to visit his mother in 1766, back to the place that he was born. And unfortunately, he became ill and he died when he was out there. And there's actually a description on the right-hand side here of what happened to him, his death. And just amazing to see that. A little before supper, sitting on a chair, he complained of giddiness in his head, could take no supper, and went to bed. The next day, there was violent fever. They sent for 2 physicians who never left him and did all in their power. But God had ordained otherwise, and in 8 days called him out of this world from the same place and even the same room in which he had been born. It's just amazing to actually receive this information. And so after, sadly, Anthony died, his widow then married again. So she married a gentleman called Thomas Maxwell Adams, and she went on to have 2 children with him. So she had a son called Thomas, born in 1771, and a daughter called Anne, about 1774. And she's already got Fonblanque daughters and a son by the first marriage. So it must have been quite a crowded household. And this was very telling here. 1780 finds Mr. Adams still in England. Frequent misunderstandings and discomforts in the family party. Excuse me. Mrs. Adams' love of her own family, as well as naturally of her 4 daughters, was a source of jealousy with him, as the following paper shows. It is in his handwriting here. So this is actually not his words. This is her words. This is Anne, his wife's words. Whereas many disputes and quarrels have for a long time unhappily existed between myself and my husband, to our great distraction, to the great grief and affliction of our children, of bad tendency and example, as it goes on, I will do in the most earnest manner assure and promise my husband I will in all respects control the circle of my acquaintances and visiting to such person and persons alone as shall be first approved by him. And it carries on. I solemnly declare and promise I will refrain from intercourse and correspondence with my unmarried sisters and my brother Richard and his wife. I will be content and satisfied to see my daughters once a month on the first Sunday, not oftener, except in occasions of extreme illness. I solemnly promise and declare I will not indirectly receive or send any letter or message to any or either of the aforesaid abducted persons. And it shall be the study of my whole life to promote and improve the happiness and prosperity of my husband and our children. And then in his words at the bottom, I do most heartily approve and accept the above declaration, and the same being religiously adhered to. I, on my part, promise to devote my whole life to the comfort and happiness of my wife, and I consent that the said daughters may visit their said mother in the manner above stipulated. Imagine somebody actually saying that and writing that and agreeing to it.
So it says it was written in his handwriting. Is her signature on it, do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Because I see at the bottom, he has witnessed his wife's signature, right? I do most heartily approve. And then presumably his signature, but I don't see her name.
No.
Wow. That's a post note.
Do actually have a copy of her signature on other documents. There was a problem with money to be supporting the children of her first husband, and I went up to the archives at Kew fairly recently, and I got some documents from the Chancery Court, and some of the documents in there are about getting payments from the money from the Fonblanque side, and she'd signed different papers, and there was all sorts of information in there. So I've got her signature elsewhere. But what a statement, and what a life. I mean, sort of controlled by your husband, supposedly willingly, but I suppose you're trying to keep the peace, aren't you?
I'm also watching those dates and thinking about the French Revolution for the folks back home, you know. Here we are dated 1780, another 10 years, and you know, the terror is underway. Wow.
And then that led to the four daughters moving out and finding their own property. Now, I knew they'd done this, but I had no idea why, because I found an insurance policy. I went up to the London Archives a few years ago, and this says Harriet, Elizabeth, Louisa, and Eleanor Fonblanque of James Street, Westminster, spinsters, on their household goods within the dwelling house only, brick, situated aforesaid, and not exceeding £340. So printed books, £10, wearing apparel, plate, china, etc. And so this led to them having an insurance policy, which meant I found out they had their own household, and it's just amazing.
Emma, you're going to be writing a book. Just saying.
This family is a goldmine that just keeps on giving. So of the four sisters, Louisa is one of them, and her health wasn't particularly good. I don't exactly know why, but she went to take the waters. And for anybody who's read things like Georgette Heyer or Regency novels or Bridgerton, all that sort of thing about people going out for the seasons, taking the waters and all that sort of thing, this is what they did. And to actually hear that somebody has actually gone and done that within the family is pretty amazing. So Louisa is better today than she could have been expected after her journey. She was for the first 2 days rather fatigued. She is drinking the waters. Mr. Calder, the apothecary, does not think she has any dangerous symptoms and makes no doubt of her recovery. Her spirits are very well upon the whole. So she starts off in Bristol there. That's in May 1787. And then she nips over to France. So in 1788, she's in Chaillot. And then Mr. Seymour told me to drink the dog's drink. I have no idea what the dog's drink is. Yes. And then it's necessary to drink a pure water. And then so she was living in Paris, and she didn't have a particularly good time in Paris. Apparently the person she was staying with wasn't very nice, so she didn't stay there very long.
Also, it's 1788. Yeah. Time ticking down here.
Yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, the following May, she died. She was only 31. And her cousin, John, so he's my line, he wrote to her and wrote to her sister, Eleanor, to be informed when my beloved cousin was to be interred. So you can see the relationship between all the cousins was really close. So they obviously carried on connecting, and sort of it says a lock of her hair as the most valuable token. And her private property amounted to £2,500 in consols. I can't remember what consols is. I think I did look that up. but just a little vignette of somebody's life of not being very well, traveling around, taking the waters, the people that she interacted with. So that was Louisa. And now we come to Harriet. So Harriet was where the Fonblanque and Phillips lines intersect. So William Hollingsworth Phillips, to start with, he didn't have a very happy life. He was orphaned when he was really young, and he had a very lonely childhood, as it states in the letters there. And he met Harriet, and they corresponded for a long time. So they married in 1785, and they were corresponding for a good 7 or 8 years before that. So it was a slow courtship, but they were obviously very fond of each other, and it carried on. And it said that they actually got married in March 1786 at St Margaret's in Westminster, and they met in 1750, and they carried on. Sorry, so that his great grandfather had died in 1750, and he was baptized there in 1757. And it says that in this side, William Holdsworth Phillips and his wife were on the happiest terms with her sisters, and they're loving friends all their lives. And he was one of them. So it wasn't that he was separate from his wife, because he writes to the sisters separately and gets letters back separately. So they get on really well here. And they spend their time traveling around, visiting different places. So Eleanor stays with Harriet and her husband for quite a while, and people move around there. I had intended, my dear girl, to have scolded you most roundly, for in a very long letter which you wrote to Eliza, there was not a syllable, not one poor wish. I'm just going to move you out the way, just one moment, respecting me, but the postman's bell has preserved you from my wrath and a dull epistle. May you be happy, very happy, and permit me to subscribe myself affectionately yours, W.H.P. It's lovely, isn't it? Just think that they got on so well. And Harriet, there was definitely a love match between them, and they had several sons themselves. And because he was in the military, they travelled around quite a lot. So they were in England and in Scotland. And so it tells where the children were born and different things like that. So for several years, he and his wife moved around to various places. They were at Lynn Regis in Norfolk, where their second son was born. And then they were in York when the third son, Henry, was born. So it's like they weren't places that were close together. There was quite a long distance. And if you consider the road network in the 1790s in England was not there, and it would have taken days to travel between different places. And after York, they went to Hull. And then they went off to Scotland. And it's like, we commenced operations at 6 o'clock in the morning, I on my horse, my companions in a hired gig, as the only chase then to be had was to be left for Harriet. And when we had got little more than a mile, it rained and blowed most dreadfully. The gig horse would not, or rather could not, move a step, so was left in the road in charge of a boy to find his way back as he could. And my miserable friends were compelled to walk 10 miles through the rains to the village of Lesmargot. And then Harriet's journey was miserable in the extreme. The 3 first days at Dumfries, she lived upon eggs, for the Scotch cooking is beyond my powers of description. Boys, thank God, are not the worse for travelling, but we shall certainly return the colour of bacon, for every room smokes. And then sort of prices of things. So notwithstanding that provisions are higher than they had been for many years, we have salmon at 2.5 a pound, veal at 3, chicken at 4. And then James, who's 6 years old, it tells about his day. At 8, he goes to dance, 9 breakfast, 10 writing school, 11 drill sergeant, 12 dancing, 1 dinner, 2 writing again, evening play and reading. As for William, all his hours are employed. Harriet sits and quilts all day long, and your humble servant, as I told you before, thinks and fidgets. Description of family life. It's just wonderful, isn't it? So, as I said, the family was all very close. So the children from the first marriage and the second marriage, they all got on very well indeed on both sides, because both of the brothers who came over to England, they died relatively young and their widows remarried. So William Hollingsworth Phillips, Thomas Maxwell Adams is Harriet's half brother. And William Hollingsworth Phillips is actually fairly well born. So the baronets of Picton Castle. And it says here in a letter that TMA, Thomas Maxwell Adams, wrote in December 1805, some time ago, Harriet asked me if I would look at Philip's genealogical table. I told her that I'd seen it, and it would be a complete thing, but for one omission. She asked me what I meant, and I candidly informed her. She was thankful to me and hurried to her better half with the intelligence. It surprised him, and for the first time in his life, he hurried to ascertain whether his son was to be a baronet or not. And so it goes on with that. And then it talks about the heir for Lord Milford. And so basically, there was something to do with people. Lord Milford gave away his inheritance to somebody who wasn't in the direct line, and it went to somebody who was further away than it should have been. So it should have come down William's line. So William Hollingsworth Phillips was Sir James Evans Phillips. His son was Vicar of Osmington. So he inherits in 1857. And then there was another person that came up there, which was Sir Richard Phillips, who was the governor of Nova Scotia, who was part of the same family. So I went down a rabbit hole. Barbara and I like rabbit holes. We talk about rabbit holes quite a lot. And basically it says that he went out and he basically was the governor of Nova Scotia. And I had no idea that there was a connection there. And James Evans Phillips, the vicar, actually got the baronetcy. So let's just show you Richard. Wait for a moment. So Richard Phillips, military officer, governor of Nova Scotia, born in Pembrokeshire in Wales. And he basically was the governor of Placentia in Newfoundland and captain general and governor-in-chief of the province of Nova Scotia. And so this is the Dictionary of Canadian Biography. So it might be familiar to some of you, but this was new to me, actually. So I just thought that's quite useful if you've got anybody who was significant over in Canada a few years ago. And there's a long, look at all of this, several pages, several screens worth of actually doing that. And it says about his marriage and things like that. Katharina Bagshaw. Interesting, Bagshaw. That's the name, because I hadn't noticed that. That was the Anne Bagshaw and Eleanor Bagshaw were the two sisters who married the two brothers who came over from France. So there may well be some connection there through her marriage, although it wasn't her maiden name. Let's go back to my thing here. Right. Have you come across the Dictionary of Welsh Biography? Again, that was one I hadn't done before I started looking at this one. So the Phillips family is mentioned in there a few times. So Lawrence Richard Phillips, so he is one of the sons of James Erasmus Phillips. Let's look at him. So again, we've got quite a lot of information there. It tells us about his life. It tells us where he went to school. So he was part of Schweppes, the brewing company. So these people actually did quite significant things here. And he was interested in breeding plants, which is actually my parents grew plants and had a nursery. So that's something that interests me personally. And talks about the line of succession there. Go back to the screen again. And then we have John Winford Phillips. Again, there's another one here. So he's the grandfather of the current Viscount St. David's. And on here, it actually does talk about the family here and says about how it devised down to the people that I'm talking about today. And then there's more information on here. He invested in the Costa Rica Railway Company and the Buenos Aires and Pacific Railway Company. So these people actually did pretty well, and they were sort of industrialists, I think is probably the best way of describing them. So that's what he looked like. And it tells me all about his children, his parents, etc., etc. So today, what helped me with my own research? Well, FamilySearch. We can't have said it. FamilySearch is just brilliant. And I have to say, when we finish this, I'm going to ask if anybody's done their homework, because I did say about people doing some searches of their own. Insurance records at the London Archives, Dictionary of Welsh Biography, the Dictionary of Canadian Biography, and that's it. I'm going to stop my share and ask you questions. So, who managed to have a little look at FamilySearch and the full text search? Barbara?
Yes, I did. I couldn't help myself immediately after the Friday live session. I just a little dabble, and I think Bill's got a little something over there too. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I've
To
done quite a
share.
bit with full text. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
go on, go on.
If I don't choke. No, I've done quite a bit. It's helped me find a lot of uh, records that uh, are not indexed anywhere.
What kind of records,
And
Bill?
like a lot of land records, deeds, conveyances. Um, that a lot of them are handwritten and it's very difficult to read at times. But full text search has done a really good job going in and uh, letting me put in like a, a surname and finding really tracing how property was moved around within a family and uh, I'm working on that on my in-laws family. So it's an amazing tool.
Definitely. And
Immediate.
one of the things that I noted is that you do actually get a transcription. So it shows you the transcription on the screen
Mhm.
at the side of the document you're looking at, and you can download things. So it gives you the
Yeah,
choice of downloading as a JPEG, a PDF file, which has got the source information and the transcript in there as well. Amazing.
yeah. And the transcripts are pretty accurate. I mean, you'll find a few spots that you might have to go in and figure out what they're talking about.
But
But
you
for the
can
most,
edit them as well.
yeah,
You can actually
yes,
make your own changes.
yeah. It's no, it's just amazing what they've done with that, and Ancestry's not too far behind them now with some of the things they're doing too. So it's a great time to be a genealogist.
Agreed.
Exactly. Well, that's pretty much what I did as soon as you were talking about it. I dove in specifically looking at kind of the family history angle, or rather family history books. And that's exactly what I found. You were talking about your letters in somebody else's family history book. I have a name Harger, which is not that common, and just, dropped it in to ask, and boom, there it was. And sure enough, there was the Cowles family, and there was an entire chapter. And within that chapter, it went through the descendancy and it was only written in I think published in like 2012. So it's recent. And then all of this detail, even my favorite part, it quoted my grandmother's book, which is
Oh,
one of the ones that I was trying to confirm. And no, actually, there's some bits that I think are just wrong. But it was quite the thrill. So it found the descendancy for one of the names that she mentions and doesn't go into a lot of detail. So it goes into a descendancy chart that does make it easier to read than her book did, and goes into names that are not mentioned there and I had not seen elsewhere. And then that becomes, well, fuel for more rabbit holes. That
One of the
was
things I
really
didn't
delightful.
mention, one of the things I forgot to mention was there are filters when you get the results. So you can actually choose the different things, so that like the collections, record types and things like that. So you can look at the things that are of interest to you rather than having to go through the whole thing and filter by
Yeah,
dates and
yeah,
things like that, which is really
yeah,
useful if you've got a lot of results.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that they've added quite recently, because I used to come into all kinds of garbage. It's not what I want, especially with other names on my family tree like Parker, which, come on, man. It's
yeah.
like there's a lot of them. But in this case, I looked from your queue, I looked in collections. And frankly, I only got as far as one of them. I mean, I stopped right there. It was it was chapters, and just blew me away. So yeah, and in the examples that you've given with letters, it was actually struck at how, I think the date on that, I'm going to guess, was early 20th century, something like that, for the date of that particular book, where it would have been very difficult to print a photo impossible to print a photo of the book, of the pages of the letters, but transcribing it is so much more valuable because you get a real human having familiarity with it to be able to transcribe it.
And on top of
that
that,
was
you actually
delightful.
get people's comments. So he did actually write
Yeah.
little extra bits and pieces in there. So you haven't just got the bald letter and you've got
Right.
trying to work out what relationships are and things like that. You've
Right.
got extra help.
With a little attitude.
So I have a question, and it's a bad one probably because I am so new to this, that I like, this is my first time, but I've been using the two other genealogy tool, which I'm drawing a blank from. So this is the first time
Ancestry.
yeah, Ancestry, and just another
Find
one,
My Past, My Heritage.
My Heritage. And so I remember now, because after last week's, I went in and I started doing something, and immediately I saw information that was wrong. And I was like, I don't know what to do now. Am I supposed to change it if I see things that are wrong? I mean,
you can't. Well, there's only certain sites that you can change things. FamilySearch, you can update things on the general family tree. Ancestry,
right, that's what I was. No.
yeah.
It's on. I mean, FamilySearch. So it says an edit thing, and it says, "Why is this wrong?" I'm like, because it's wrong, So I don't know what kind of information do I like. If this is a long-winded question, we don't have to do it here, but I don't know what to do when I see errant information. I have even a photo of the tombstone, which will give, well, unfortunately, the tombstone is wrong too. The man was like 190 years old when he died, so the numbering wasn't right, but it's the wrong name. The wife was from Baltimore. This family was from upstate New York. The children are all correct. My great-grandmother is correct. It's her parents that are incorrect.
If you've got some proof of that in some way, whether you've got family documents you've inherited or something like that, family archive, you can put that on there as a proof, just a note saying this change from X to X as
but do I change it?
Yes.
Do I change the name from Martin
yes.
to Daniel and
McCarthy?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not what you'll also somebody else's information.
Yeah. What you'll also find on there is there are a lot of duplicates. Lots and lots of duplicates. So you find people who descend from one child of parents, someone descends from another child, and they've both created the parents. And so I end up going through and merging duplicates to try and make people come together, as it were, so you get the proper family.
I think this FamilySearch is going to be ideal for the British side, the family tree that came from the branch that came from England versus the ones that came from Ireland. But one thing I did do this past week, which was somewhat unique, I think, is I looked at the land records for where the poor, impoverished Irish came from to see who were the barons or baronets of those lands and what were their political persuasions, so I could figure out things like, were they allowed to burn turf for fuel? So, and if so, it tells a difference than if they weren't, right? Or if they had more liberal renting policies than. So I found a relative, and I can conjure up a story where he was lucky that his landlord was not a slumlord, an absentee baron. And I think that's what perhaps gave him enough money to save up to come to the States, whereas the others would be. And I got this idea from Jennifer because, people were going into workhouses and poorhouses when they couldn't pay the rent. Anyway.
Or they starved, basically.
Do you have a database for Irish that are Irish nobility by any chance, or would that be the same as family? Okay.
You could look on things like Find My Past and Ancestry. Just have a look on different things, and just because some people will have the same records, some people have had other records, some people have slightly different copies of the same records. So yeah, but there's Irish genealogy websites and things. So there are some information, but it depends how far back you're going. Really,
they're not as progressive as this. I mean, there's no full text search. There's just a mess. This has been ideal.
Ask around. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, well, I found out most of my information from FamilySearch by going to the Mormon church. That's where most of my searches have been. So on both sides of my family. Now we've gone back to the 1700s, and thanks to Emma getting me going on the side from Kent. So yeah, no, I found most of the information on
This is
Family
great.
Search.
That's a
Yeah.
great point for newbies. I have found tremendously helpful as a newbie myself. Is going to your, and you say the Mormon church, you're
Yeah,
going to the Family Search Center at your local. I mean, Calgary's a big city. You have a Family Search Center with missionaries who are there, where their job as missionaries is to help people coming in and guide them around. So Diane, you have massive, incredible resources out there in New Jersey. You can find a nearest Family Search Center. And, as with most things, stating your problem can be really, really helpful to going in and having someone help you get there. So, for example, your question specifically about Ireland has some very specific sets of problems related to fires that damaged records and whatnot. So going in with your specific question might help a lot, and then, send you off to go explore the rest on your own and then come back. And the other point I would have, again, as a newbie, don't know what I'm doing, getting into Family Search.
You're a veteran compared to me.
Going into Family Search, I have found the duplicates point. I go in and say, oh, but this is all wrong. Well, it turns out this one's all wrong, but there's 4 other copies of the same family. And one of them is much better than the others, better in the sense that it correlates with the other information that I have. And
Right.
I've always found that field that asks you why you think you know this. What makes you so special that you think
What
you
makes
know
me
this?
special?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I know is unfortunately not a good answer. Um, well, but it's usually the kernel to, well, I know because my mother told me, because my mother has this document. Okay, so let's talk about the document. Love your mother, but let's talk about the document. And yeah, that goes a long way. And unfortunately, as I've learned, I know because my grandmother wrote a book is meaningless. It's a good start. It's a nice little, cookie trail, but it also, as I have learned, leads to all these happy rainbows and unicorns. Not necessarily the truth.
Good points there, Barbara. Diane, if you go to one of the Family Search centers, you can access things like Ancestry for free. So they've got access, so you don't necessarily need a subscription. So a good point to mention there. Pardon me. And Barbara, I was actually looking at a handwritten family tree. I actually got lots of research out. I had papers everywhere today and trying to work out different things. And I thought, oh, I'll have a read through that and just check everything, and looking through it and thinking, this doesn't look right, and just trying to work out on here. And it's like someone's handwritten it from 50 years, 70 years ago. And just thinking, that bit looks right. No, that's not right. And just going through it and trying to work out. And I started scribbling on bits and pieces and things. So any information that you get from your family is a good starting point, but you do need to verify it.
And
The
bear in
land of
mind,
truth tellers and liars.
and
Go ahead.
bear in mind that the tree that you see on Family Search may not be accurate, because that's a tree that anybody can put things into. So go back and look for original sources. Don't believe anybody else's work. You've got to prove everything yourself, or
And
you're gonna
question
or you're
those
gonna wind
original
up with
sources.
with some really weird things happening in your tree if you don't view everything very skeptically.
And leading on from that, Bill, sort of people lied, and people didn't necessarily know things. So when people died, people gave dates of their age. They might not have known when they were born, where they were born, who their parents were, things like that. So bishops' transcripts made errors when copying from the with the parish records, the births, marriages and deaths, every quarter the bishop had to report them up the line. So a copy was made of those and sent up to the archbishop and things like that. So, but basically the copies weren't necessarily the same as what was in the original parish registers. So it might have contained as much information, it might have been errors, all sorts of things like that. In censuses and things, people weren't literate, so they didn't know how to spell their names or all that sort of thing. And people lied if they didn't want to be found. People changed their names.
Right.
But people couldn't get divorced, so they might have set up with a second husband or wife. So there's all sorts of things. So you have to be skeptical when looking at things. So you have to sort of think about the information that you have and then weigh things based upon that information.
Emma, why would the ages of people within a household change dramatically over a 10-year, from one census to the next? That's been something that, because I'm trying to figure out birth dates, right? So by subtracting, and I'm like, okay, here she's 27, there she's 16. I mean, it's like all over the place.
Well,
and those are bad examples because it's more like here she's 37 and now she's 49.
Yes. Yeah.
I get when they're underage trying to make themselves older, but the other way I didn't quite get.
Okay. A couple of things to mention is the census didn't always take place on the same date.
Okay.
So it varied. So I've got a little calendar here. So it goes from, hang on a minute, just get it off the wall here. Between 1841 and 1921, it was June, March, April, March, April, and June. So you can see over that period of time, there's quite an opportunity for a couple of years either side.
Birthdays.
People didn't necessarily know their own birth date. People didn't necessarily know exactly how old they were. And also the people who were actually giving the information for the census might not necessarily have been the person themselves. So, and people, there's all sorts of opportunities for information to be different.
Who was allowed to answer a census taker? Was it, could a servant, for example, answer questions, or would it have to be head of household, or?
It would be whoever was there, really. So it would be the head of the household in the first instance. But if they weren't at home, if there were only servants, then you would only record that the servants were there. You wouldn't record that the head of the household wasn't there, because they would be recorded on another census somewhere else. You do very rarely get people recorded on two censuses, but that's not common. But it's basically people, it was where you were residing at the time. It's not who the members of the household were. It's who was actually there.
So it might be possible the head of household was a guy who didn't know the dates of his wife's birthday or something like that. Didn't know how old she was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes the U.S. census too, it could be a neighbor giving the information. If they went a couple of times to the house and no one answered the door, they'll ask the next door neighbor. So,
got it.
Yeah.
The other thing I would add is that it is astonishing to me, but how names were reused. So Robert is born, Robert is 4 years old, Robert dies, new baby is born, you name it Robert. So the census comes along and now you have a big age difference to this Robert. It's just not the same Robert.
This is where there's a site called Free BMD, Free Births, Marriages and Deaths, and you can have a look on there, and they've got quite a lot. They haven't got a full data set, but births and deaths, they've got quite a few. There's a big gap between, I think it's about 1950 and 1980 for one of them, but you can look on there and it will tell you who someone's mother's maiden name is, different things like that. So it's worthwhile having a look on there, because you can do a search for a household. So if you look for the person, you can put in their surname, and if you know you've got one child, for example, and you know what their mother's maiden name is, if you put the mother's maiden name in there, it can bring up all their brothers and sisters. And if you leave it open, because as it is in that example I gave, the people moving around the country, you might not have them all born in the same place. You might expect that they're all born in the same place, but they might have moved for work, they might have moved for lots of different reasons, and you might find people with children born in lots of different places. But because you put the mother's maiden name in there and the father's name, you can give it a date range and say between a 20-year period and see what comes up.
Okay.
And then if you want to, you can go onto the General Register Office in this country, and you can buy copies of their online copies, there's PDFs for about £3 of quite a lot of births and deaths. If some of them you'll have to buy a certificate, which can be £8 or £12 and posted to you, but you can see quite a lot of them actually online. And that's a relatively inexpensive way of proving or disproving something. So I did a probate search for someone recently. So I was basically given a person's name, their birth certificate, and the person they were supposedly inheriting from's name. And that's all the information that I had. And so I found out that the person who died died in 2023 in a completely different part of the country. So I found what I thought was his family. And then I went and actually looked online for all the different details of the siblings to this person and working out where they fitted in the birth order. And it turns out that the two people ended up being cousins, because it was thought the solicitor thought that he might have been her uncle that had died, but it's actually proving it. And so I looked through and I've actually ordered loads of copies to actually prove legally for her to inherit. But online, I could actually look at these things and get copies of them then and there, a lot of them.
Very cool. How far back do those records go?
Registration, so 1830 something, 1837, I think some of them are.
Okay.
1855, I can't remember exactly. There are gaps, but there are quite a lot of them on there. But I do that. And the other thing that I will also do is, if possible, I will get a copy of somebody's will, because wills are a gold mine in terms of who inherits what, and if you they say their descendants in there and the beneficiaries and things. So when I'm trying to prove my own things, wills are £1.50 at the moment. So it's, if a will exists, it's always worthwhile getting it. And some older wills are available for free from the National Archives here has something called Discovery. If you just set up a free account on there, and basically you can download a will pre-registration. Bear in mind that they will be handwritten and not always easy to read, but you can transcribe them using some software that I recommended previously that I use, Transcript.
Wow. Well, this has been fantastic, Emma. Do we have more questions, as we have a few more minutes to before we wrap up?
Has it blown your mind, Diane?
I've used that free website that Emma's just talking about. Yeah, that works pretty well.
FreeBMD.
Yeah.
There's also one called FreeReg, which has some of the censuses on. FreeCen has some of the censuses on.
FreeCen? C-I-N?
C-E-N.
C-E-N.
Doesn't have that much information, but you can sometimes find people on there.
Emma, there's also a website, something to do with newspapers. Do you know that website?
Yes, there's what's called the British Newspaper Archives. That's a subscription website. It's around about £70 a year, but it's really good. And what you can do with that is you can put in whatever search you want to, and you can save bookmarks for the things that you find. You can download things, and I end up downloading things, and I basically screenshot things and put things into different documents. And some of the things that I've put on here, I've used from there. Newspaper articles and things in the past, in previous Emma Explores. But so the British Newspaper Archive. And then there's also something called newspapers.com, which is associated with Ancestry. So you have to subscribe separately for that, unless you've got the full subscription. I think, I can't remember exactly, but it's not, I think it's about $40 or $50 a year. But again, you get a different
half year.
Yeah, you get a different perspective with that one. You get a lot more American things in there.
One of my ladies at the church had that subscription for the newspapers, so she found quite a few different things at the turn of like the 1900s. Yeah.
And one of the other things again is you'll find.
Yeah, I have 2 newspaper subscriptions, so if you ever need anything, let me know.
That you'll find is what was I thinking of? Not archives, newspapers.
Trove?
No, nothing to do with that. Some of our local library will give you access to things like the Oxford Dictionary of Biography and things like that. So it's worthwhile having a look and seeing what you can get by using your local library, because you can actually see quite a lot of information there.
Mm-hmm. Here in the US, many libraries have a subscription to something called ProQuest, which is a service that then in turn gives you free access to Ancestry, and a few others, but Ancestry is the main one from my perspective. The other thing I was going to mention, go ahead.
I was just going to say, aside from Ancestry and the actual genealogy sites, you've got lots of sites that host biographies, other things that aren't the main subscription ones there, other subscription websites that you can get access to. Yeah.
The other one I was going to mention, because I think you did earlier, was Trove from the UK, from Australia. Sometimes has some interesting access to British newspapers, surprisingly. And you can get there from the Trove site, TROVE, which is an Australian government, I believe, government arm of their archiving system, right?
Yes, and Trove contains interesting information. It's worthwhile having a look just to see, because there are things on there that you wouldn't expect to find.
Exactly.
And always look at the local archives or national archives for the country you're interested in.
Can you give a general perspective in terms of things that are UK specific or Britain specific, and whether and how and when they would include Irish records?
All Irish records were British before, I can't remember what date it was, because Ireland was part of Britain. Part of the United Kingdom. You won't find separate Irish records unless they're the individual parish records, which you'd probably have to go to the local parish to actually see. Apart from that, can't think of anything offhand.
That's fine. That's fine. Someone like Daniel Loftus is a wonderful resource for Irish records. Daniel usually uses his name, Daniel Loftus, on all sorts of different sites. You'll find him everywhere.
If you just look up things like Irish births, marriages and deaths, you'll get 2 or 3 websites that come up. It's something like irishgenealogy.ie
that's
or something like that.
irishgenealogy.ie has been pretty good.
Yeah, and then you've got the censuses from 1901 and 1911, where you do get occasional people appearing on them. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, as always, Emma. I don't want to keep you too late into the evening, but I always appreciate your making time for this. And once again, we extend this time the United States and Canada. So thank you so much, Linda, for joining us to represent as we cover Nova Scotia in this particular insight. I'm only sorry that we didn't have Marcy here to enjoy that one. We'll catch you next time. But again, as always, thank you for these. Any tidbits about what's coming next month?
I've got a lot of different ideas. I haven't settled on one just yet. I'm thinking about different things.
Okay, keeping it close to the vest. If I may inject here, you've been adding to your own Emma's family pages as well lately, which have been a great fun to see how the pros do it. And of course, always fun to follow our new friends as we follow the Fonblanque family or some of the other lines and get to know them as well. So thank you for those. So with that, I will wrap this up and thank you all so much for joining today. We will be back to Kathy's Corner next week with a Sunday preview program. Now, again, we're going to the 10 a.m. slot as Kathy Stone welcomes this time Lori Olson White as her guest on Sunday, because I'm going to be busy. I will be tied up in other personal excitement in my own family. And then next Thursday, of course, is Kathy's Corner at our slightly new time. She picks it up in the Pacific time window at 4 Pacific, 7 and I'm sorry, midnight in the UK for Kathy's Corner. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Till next
Have a
time.
good weekend, Barbara.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.